Welcome to the Abort Ignorance Montana podcast. I'm Tanaia, your host. On this podcast, we seek to have conversations that help us educate, advocate, and heal the culture in Montana surrounding abortion. On today's episode, we have a special guest, a friend of mine, Robin Sertell, and we're going to be talking about a hot topic in the pro-life movement right now that is the difference in the question of, should we criminalize women? Should there be a penalty for women who abort? And this is a fascinating conversation to have, so stick around for it. As always, please subscribe to our podcast so you get notifications of new episodes coming out. You can download episodes so that you can listen to them anywhere on the go. And then we want to be having a conversation with all of Montana. So email us at abortignorancemt@gmail.com with any thoughts or questions about today's podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, private message us on those platforms as well. We really want to hear from you. So we're going to dive right in. Thank you for being on, Robin.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we are so excited to have you. So Robin she actually has a ministry called Robin Sertell Ministries, and she is an abortion survivor, and we'll have her on at some point to talk about that whole story. It's amazing, and God is all throughout that story. But she goes around and shares that story with people around the nation, really. And so she has a group called Robin Sertell Ministries, as well as a nonprofit organization here in Montana called Montanans for Life, which is a pro-life lobbying organization, and for any pro-life issues that they have. And so she has a busy schedule. She's also a friend. I met Robin at the legislature, and I also got to hear her story at a speaking engagement years ago. And being in this movement and being in Montana, our paths are just crossing over all different times, and it's a pleasure to always get to be with Robin. So thank you for being on today. Again, thank you. We're going to just talk about this topic of criminalizing moms. So you can share a little about yourself if you want to, or you can just dive right in to what is this topic even about in the pro-life movement right now.
So it is a resurgence of interest in this topic, Tanaia. A little bit about me, as you well know, but for your listeners, I was the education coordinator for the Abortion Survivors Network when it first got off the ground several years ago. And during that time, there was a fresh interest in this topic of criminalizing women. And our organization had to grapple with it because we, as abortion survivors, so we were the babies, and our moms all tried to abort us, and there are several abortion survivors. We'll talk about that another time. But for us, forgiveness was so important to our message. It is central, it's key. Being able to forgive our moms and really walk in forgiveness and extend forgiveness to any other mom who has lost their child to abortion, any other dad who has lost their child to abortion, grandparents, others through what we call the ripple effect through the family. We really wanted to be able to be focused on that. And we were in a sort of a denominational structure, if you will. So our network started out under the And Then There Were None network, which is headed up by Abby Johnson. And Abby started to embrace this theology that moms should be criminalized. And what she meant by that was that there should be equal protection for a baby who is killed inside the womb as well as outside the womb. And it's a little challenging to unpack all of this, so we're going to do the best we can in the time we have today. But what we found out was that Abby was really focused on this equal protection measure, if you will. And so we actually pulled the Abortion Survivors Network out from under that denominational covering, if you will. It's kind of like all being part of the Methodist Church or the Presbyterian Church or Catholic Church or whatever. We decided we were going to go separate because that would really hinder our efforts. We didn't want to be associated with that. And I give Melissa Oden all the credit in the world. She was our founder and director, and she's also best friends with Abby Johnson, and she walked that out with grace and with honesty and a lot of intentionality. That concept kind of fell by the wayside for a while. Abby got busy with other things. We really didn't hear as much about it in the mainstream pro-life movement for a few years. And on the fringe, if you will, of the pro-life movement, there's a group that call themselves abolitionists, and they embrace ideas that are kind of radical. They're very, very, very focused on all or nothing, all right now methods to abolish abortion, which we all want to get rid of abortion, right? We want to make abortion something that we don't even think about. We want to encourage moms to carry their children to term. And even if they adopt that child out, the outcomes are better psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually for mom and baby, as well as for dad. So we really want to encourage those sorts of outcomes. But I think the methodology is a little different. So that was my first really grappling with this whole idea where, yeah, as the baby who was aborted 3 times, my mother tried to kill me with abortion. Yeah, I really would have loved to have been protected. I would have loved for people to understand that my value was the same before I was born as after I was born. But I don't know that this is the right way to go about it. And I think moms need to come to Jesus, not to jail.
Hmm.
And so we really started then where I really started to understand that, wow, this is a method that I don't think I would embrace because if you talk to people who purport to really support this, there are a lot of loose ends that they don't seem to have thought through very well. So we'll talk through some of that today and how that could really impact people here in Montana.
Yeah. Well, that gives a lot of backstory. Thank you. Because it's a little bit new for me to be hearing about this idea.
Mhm.
And that there's, it's always heartbreaking when there's any type of movement where fundamentally you agree on the same things, but there's still division in that movement. And I think, especially in our pro life movement right now, and in Montana, we've had such momentum going in Montana, even just over the past few years. I've heard from people that are, decades older than I am, and they've been in the movement in Montana for way longer than I have. And they're saying there's never been a unity in Montana on this topic like there is right now. And so I really don't want to see a fracturing like we're seeing in the nation happening in our state, where we become radical on either side of that issue to the point where we can't even work together to accomplish the same goal, which is making abortion unthinkable. So could you talk a little bit about how this idea of sending moms to jail instead of to Jesus, so to speak, how that's being presented as a positive thing for the pro-life movement?
Sure. So really what the proponents are saying is that back when, slavery was abolished, things just happened very quickly at the end, and they just put forth these laws and bam, people were freed. And, we've kind of walked around softly for a long time, and we have these regulatory bills related to abortion, right? So
Mm-hmm.
regulating when abortion is legal
Mm-hmm.
in incremental steps. And they're saying that they don't see that as being fruitful. They don't see that that has been helpful.
Mm.
Well, here in Montana, Tanaia, we had LR 131, which is probably around when we first met.
Yep.
Um, Matt Regier carried that and it went to the ballot. LR 131 basically said that when a baby is born alive after one or more abortion attempts, they deserve the same care and reporting as any other baby. It is what we call the Born Alive Infants Protection Act. And so I became involved at that time because I had been so busy with the Abortion Survivors Network on a global scale. I was looking around up here globally, and I didn't realize what was going on in my own state.
Mm.
And I became aware of this, and I just kind of went, now, wait a minute, Lord, what do you want me to do? I need to make sure that when babies are born alive after abortion attempts here in my state, they are given the same care and reporting. So I went out and I started to share my story everywhere.
Mm.
That didn't fly. We lost at the ballot, and the very next legislative session, where you and I met up at the legislature, Carrie Seekins Crow carried a bill for the care of the babies. That was passed,
Mhm.
incremental step. The next session, which is our immediate previous session, Representative Lee Deming carried a bill for the reporting requirement. So we were able to do something incrementally, and that did pass, incrementally to accomplish the whole thing here in Montana.
Yeah.
Incrementalism did work.
Wow.
So where we couldn't get it done with LR 131 doing everything at once, two subsequent sessions have proven it works.
Yeah.
And gosh, you listen to the other side, listen to the abortion lobby. They have been incrementally moving the legal time frame within that mom can abort her child from very early in the pregnancy, safe, legal, and rare. They have been moving that needle all the way down to where now abortion is being used, and it's actually infanticide after birth up to 28 days in some states. So, incrementalism is something that the other side uses. They know it works. So we know that it's a little bit crazy to even say that incrementalism doesn't work. And so these abolitionists are known for two things. One is they are dead set against incrementalism. Everything has to be now or nothing, completely all abortion needs to be abolished or nothing. So what that looks like for them is they will not vote for a bill or vote positively for a bill that would say, we will protect babies after a certain time. So say liability, maybe they'll say it's a heartbeat bill or pain capable. They'll say, no, I can't vote in favor of that because that would make babies who are younger than that subject to abortion. So I can't come into agreement with that. That's sin. And they're very religious about this. And when you see the religious spirit rising up, there's always a spirit of division. And we see there's a lot of divisiveness with this. So there's a lot of chaos that comes with it. I've seen abolitionists walk into meetings where they have no place on the agenda, right in the Flathead where you are, Tanaia, and grab the mic and start calling out that these groups or these people are not pro-life. And that's a catchphrase that they use. So and so is not pro-life. And if you listen to some of these podcasts, you see somebody, right here in Montana, they will carry on about so and so not being pro-life and incrementalism being sin and all that. And these are the same things we see in the church. You and I both are very active in the church world as well. And we see, the spirit of division rising up, and we pray all the time for a spirit of unity in the body. And I think it's the same spirit. And it's sad because we want to accomplish the same goal. But what happens when we tell mom, it's legal to abort your child in other states, but here you can't do that, or we will enforce the law quite harshly. There was just a bill in Tennessee that would allow up to and including the death penalty for moms.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
How do we even go about sorting out, over 60% of moms are coerced into their abortions. They're forced. They don't feel like they have a choice. And now she's stuck between that and I'm going to get, possibly the death penalty.
Yeah.
I just don't see this being viable as a solution.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. And before I even was even mildly educated on this idea, I now have language for it, I guess. I've always been in favor of incrementalism. When I first started learning about what abortion was, the part of the reason it was so disturbing to me was because I looked at the history. And Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, that movement started out of what was probably meant to be a good desire for women women have rights and freedom and rights to their own body. And it went so far off base, but she started with birth control, just advocating birth control before conception happens. And over the decades, it has, just like you explained, they've chipped away at the morality in America of what, and really across the world, what do we accept as a correct morality on this. And at one point, abortion was unthinkable. So you didn't have to have laws about it or these conversations. And they have worked with that divisive spirit and chipped away enough and caused enough questions, that goes back to the garden, who told you you could eat that? And, the accusation that came from the enemy to Eve and Adam that caused them to question God. So there's these questions of, well, when is it okay? And they've chipped away to the point where we are here now, where we have abortion, really infanticide, like you said, up to 28 days after the baby is born. And and the enemy and that side, the pro-abortion side, has been so committed to the long game. We'll take whatever we can get in the culture as long as it's on the side of pro-abortion. And so
Mhm.
I've always had the perspective that we have to do that on the pro-life side as well. And it's hard because, you mentioned the 6-week heartbeat bill. If I was in Congress, I would vote for that. But you do it, and that justice side that we have, that there's still babies that will die, but how many will live? How many moms will come to the realization because of that bill? And so I think that we do have to look at it from that perspective of, we can't just expect that we can have especially in the church, we have let the culture go for decades. We haven't had the church influencing the culture as much as it should. And now we're at this point where we are shocked at the level of the culture of death that is in our society. And we just want to snap our fingers and have it go back to how it was, where abortion was unthinkable. And that's not where people's hearts and minds are. So even if that is what we all know is right, we have to work with what we have and where we're at. And there are so many lies that have gone forth from the pro-abortion side to women. And so that's like a pretty hard stop for me of, it is, how can it possibly be fair or right to prosecute someone that doesn't even know, a lot of them don't even know what they did until decades later. That doesn't make any sense to me. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. To go back to the idea that this is like slavery and it's like ending slavery, I don't think that's a good illustration, because slavers knew what they were doing. Slavers knew they were enslaving human beings.
yeah,
And this is not that.
yeah,
We have had decades of intentional indoctrination. When Margaret Sanger first started with birth control, she was calling babies weeds. And she was very intentional with that. And we know that birth control actually does kill babies.
yeah.
Birth
Oh yeah.
control prevents babies from having the nutrition and the environment that they need so they can attach to mom. And, contraception that we grew up thinking was the right thing to do is because of the indoctrination that Margaret Sanger intentionally, incrementally introduced to society. We would have never bought, 100 years ago when this started, we would have never bought some of the lies that have gone forward. And incrementally, they have pushed this in our education system, in our healthcare system, in all of our media, in our government.
Yeah.
And now these moms, like you said, they don't believe that that baby is alive in the early stages. They believe
Yeah.
that's a clump of cells
Yeah.
to an extent. And we can't expect that, just dropping the hammer on moms who are in a situation that they didn't plan for and making them even more scared. We can't expect that that's going to have good outcomes.
Yeah.
You know, we see that, 70% of moms who abort do it for financial reasons.
Wow.
So, how can we say that when a mom has, say, she's got 3 kids at home, dad just ran off with a mistress, and I'm hypothesizing, but these happen every day. And, so mom's got 3 mouths to feed. She finds out 4 months later that she's pregnant. She wasn't thinking about that at the time. And wow, he's left me with another mouth to feed. I can't afford the ones I have, so I'm going to go abort before I have another baby, is the mindset. 7 out of 10 times, this is what's happening. Wow. So now we're going to tell her, you are eligible for the death penalty or jail.
Yeah.
And so now we're orphaning those children. What happened to being there for widows and orphans in their time of need, like scripture said? That's
Mm-hmm.
completely the opposite. This is not, a sustainable outcome,
Yeah.
because now we have all these new wards of the state. And these poor kids are growing up scared to death. Oh my gosh, the government killed my mom, or the government took my mom, or broke up my family, or however you want to say it. So these poor kids are growing up in a culture where this tyrannical idea, has come forth, if this were to go through. And I think it's important to see that all these loose ends weren't really thought about.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have about 3,000 pregnancy help centers across the country. I'm talking to you from one right here in Hamilton that we just started, as you know. I'm really excited about this. We have moms that come in every day, and a lot of them just need diapers. They just need, financial help. What if we were to say to them, if you come here, we are now probably legally compelled to report. If this legislation were to go through, we would be compelled to report every mom who came and was thinking of abortion. And so, how would that impact pregnancy help centers? It would basically close the doors. It would say, we're not safe. What does that do? That aligns with what the other side has been saying about pregnancy centers for ages. Pregnancy centers are fake clinics. They're not to be trusted. They give your information to people. These are all lies that have been, saturating our culture for a while. And I can tell you, pregnancy help centers give out millions of dollars of material goods and services. They are completely safe. They're completely confidential. They operate within full scope of the law.
Mm-hmm.
And that would actually close the doors.
Mm-hmm.
It would tell moms there is no place for you to go except to the abortion clinic.
Yeah.
And it would drive everything back underground. Let's talk about the pill. The abortion pill in Montana accounts for over 80% of our abortions now.
Yep.
What actually needs to be done is we need to stop that. We need to turn that faucet off. We need to actually go after the abortion industry who is flooding our streets with these things
Mm-hmm.
and making it absolutely just unregulated. And these moms can get they can abort their children at home on the toilet by themselves. They are their own abortionist and they're absolutely traumatized by it. And that's horrible. But how do we tell those moms, well, now, if this legislation type were to pass here in Montana, how would we tell those moms, well, now you are, a criminal for doing this, but the people selling you these things, the people who are basically giving them away like candy,
Mm-hmm.
they're free to do whatever they want. They can flood the streets with this. It would be like our current fentanyl crisis where things are, either flooding in. And what if we were to say the fentanyl was legal and to be flooding in, but you can't sell it to your neighbor? That's illegal.
Yep.
It just doesn't jive.
Yeah. And with that kind of analogy or word picture with the drugs, we don't necessarily hold someone that overdoses on fentanyl. We don't hold them accountable and say,
Yep.
or say that they came back from an almost overdose. They're not going to go to the death penalty in jail. They're going to go to rehab. But I think all, especially in Montana, we want the drug lords, the people that sell drugs to our kids, we want them to be held accountable. We want them to be put in a place where they can't distribute those drugs anymore to our children, to our families, so that it then harms those families and those children. And I think that is a really good way to look at the abortion pill that you were talking about. Like, we have to hold who's providing it and why are they providing it. And we don't have laws that require informed consent or a doctor to look at a woman and discover, does she have an ectopic pregnancy, which is life-threatening, or is she further along than she thinks she is? And then this pill is also life-threatening at that point. There's no regulation on that. So it's almost as, the Wild West of the drug world. It's very similar with the abortion pill in our state. And so that doesn't make any sense to hold the women accountable for, taking something that, one, they don't even know what it is because the education around it is just full of lies. And
Mhm.
two, they also don't realize that it is a baby because until they have the abortion. And then there's many stories of women, they realize that as they see their baby on their bathroom floor, and they're just destroyed emotionally because of that. How could you hold that woman accountable when she already has regret because she didn't even know what was actually going on?
Absolutely. Tanae, I go out and I keynote banquets for pregnancy centers all across the country. I cannot tell you how many times I have had this same scenario play out where towards the end of the banquet, one of the volunteers or staff member is trying to kind of get me off the side to talk to me. And usually I travel with my husband. You've met Rick.
Yep.
Does a great job at the book table. And I share copies of my book. And, someone's there waiting for me to sign it. And I can always tell there's this staff or volunteer, and she's kind of shaky and a little bit tentative. She's not looking for a signature. And so I'll talk to her and I'll find the same story played out over and over. And it is disgusting. It is heartbreaking, but it really shows the heart of this matter. She will share that one day she was working at the center and a mom came in with a little container or a Ziploc baggie. And this is a mom who completed a pill abortion at home. She took both pills. She delivered her child into the toilet, and they're always instructed flush and don't look. Except she looked, and she saw that her baby was fully formed and still moving.
Oh,
And so they come up to me because they're going, "This is an abortion survivor." And they're right. But what happens is mom scoops baby out of the toilet, puts baby in some sort of container, doesn't know what to do, ends up at the pregnancy center because they're told, don't go to the hospital, don't go to the doctors, don't go to the emergency room. So what do I do? Well, I'm going to go to the pregnancy center. And they do. Well, the pregnancy center can't save that baby. The baby's usually dead by the time they get there. And so now we've got moms traumatized. Now the staff is traumatized because they have no grid for that one. And that's why they're coming to me, because my story is something that's a connecting point for them. And the horror that that mom has experienced is beyond what most of us can fathom.
yeah.
How could we then tell her there's no support system left for you anymore, because instead of being there to counsel you and give you what you need to be successful in life, we are instead going to say, you're wrong, you're bad, we're shaming you, we're going to criminalize you.
Yeah.
Instead of shame, we're to give a double portion of honor. We should honor mom for coming forward and sharing the truth. And she needs a hug.
Yeah.
She needs a box of tissues,
Mm-hmm.
probably a pallet full at that point. How could we say that we are providing the loving option when we're not there for her at that point?
Yeah.
When we're selling her, okay, thanks for coming forward. Now here's the handcuffs, honey.
Yeah.
When you talk to proponents of this, I was at a big pro-life leaders meeting not too long ago, middle of February, and several proponents of this type of legislation came, and they were trying to encourage us as a movement to embrace this idea. And those that had been in the healing space, like you and I went through the training for
Mm-hmm.
Save One and things like that. Those that have been in this space for decades rose up and said, you can't even begin to imagine the destruction that this would bring, because moms would not have a safe place to go
Yeah.
to deal with the shame and the pain and the guilt and the fact that they have such a hard time forgiving themselves
Yeah.
as it is. We would just put nails in that coffin.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such such a powerful way to paint the picture of what this could do to moms and to women. And I think that for those of us out there in Montana, maybe listening to this, that that you want to see it abolished, and we're in those of us who are Christians, I think we have to be really careful with the justice side of God. I think there is a justice side. I think that's biblical. But there's also a mercy side and a compassion side. And
Mhm.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned what the Bible teaches about caring for widows and orphans. And we have to care for women that are in these, what feels like an impossible situation, and they're choosing to abort. And then, especially after that has already happened, we would pray that we catch them before it happens. And that's why we're doing the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, is we want to change that culture. But if we hit them with the long arm of the law instead of a hug, like you mentioned, they're not going to come to Jesus. They're not going to know the forgiveness of God that is the only way forward to heal from something like killing your own child, especially when you didn't even know that's what happened. You're going to feel betrayed. You're going to feel betrayed by the abortion clinic, by any friends or family that told you it was fine. And those women that go through these healings, it's just, I mean, I think it's one thing to deal with, a death or even a murder of someone that you know, but to deal with the death of your child as well as realizing what your hand was in it, going and sitting in a jail cell isn't going to teach her a lesson. It's going to cause her to reject God and reject people that because like you mentioned, a lot of people that are proponents of criminalizing women are very religious and strict about these things. And I don't think that's an accurate representation of God's heart for these women.
I would agree. I
Yeah.
really would agree. And again, the proponents, and I mentioned Abby, and I've worked with Abby, and
Yeah.
I appreciate all the work that she's done, especially for people coming out of these abortion clinics. My concern is that she has pivoted and is using her platform to really push for this agenda. So I'm concerned about any speaking engagements that she has right now. She's been very upfront that that's what she's using her voice for right now.
Yeah.
And so I would just kind of give this time to blow over personally. But she was asked in a podcast recently, well, what about your ministry Love Line? And what about pregnancy centers? What would this do? And her Loveline ministry, for those that don't know, has done a fabulous job of raising funds to give moms in need the things that kind of are gap items that, the government doesn't give, pregnancy centers don't give, it's beyond what anybody else's scope would cover, such as a car or paying up her back rent or, big items. And Abby's done a fantastic job with that.
Yeah.
And so when asked, well, what would this do to Loveline? Her answer was, gosh, I hadn't thought about that. I don't know.
Wow.
And that was just, a couple weeks ago. And she's been pushing for this for years. So I would caution anyone who thinks that this is a good idea to really look at, have we thought this through? Another big proponent is Seth Gruber, who I worked with years ago. We brought him in to do a bunch of work for the Abortion Survivors Network. He was a close friend of ours. And he started out under Scott Klusendorf as an abortion apologist. His mom ran a pregnancy center, and he's very passionate. He's done a fantastic job with something called the 1916 Project, where it explains the history of abortion and Margaret Sanger and what that all came about as and how she used incrementalism. What he is now doing is pushing for the criminalization of moms.
Mm.
So he has pivoted his stance, he has pivoted his platform for that. And he has a gentleman by the name of AJ Hurley going out on his behalf and really pushing for this. And you'll see Abby and AJ Hurley doing events together. I think there's one coming up in the Flathead sometime in the very near future.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned that they're using their voice to really try to convince college kids this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Because they haven't had to sort through this as much as some of the rest of us. Some of them have had abortions and they've sorted through other parts of this, no doubt. But they're astute to the things that they know. My concern is by pushing this and changing hearts and minds, and they're upfront about the fact that they haven't thought all this through. So AJ Hurley was on another podcast recently where he was asked a similar question. What about pregnancy centers? If this is made legal, what would that do to pregnancy centers? And he had to think about it. And you could tell he hadn't thought it through. And he finally came back with an answer that basically said, well, I think it would be like, if you came to church and you said you were a murderer, but you were having a come to Jesus moment, we would hug you and love you and send you off to jail. I think it's very telling that these people haven't thought this all the way through. My concern is it's not like murder. And they're using the term abortion is murder. Murder is something that we can't even use when we testify in a lot of states and on the national level because murder is a very specific legal term. Murder has to include two qualities. It has to be premeditated and it has to be against the law. Well, abortion is not currently against the law. And how can we say it's premeditated if mom doesn't even know what she's doing?
Yeah.
So I think spouting out that abortion is murder is something we need to be real careful with. It is killing. It is against the law of God, but we need to change those hearts and minds. We need to share the truth, and we need to help people to understand the ramifications of what they're doing. When we look at the people that are pushing this agenda, my concern is when we go forward with legislation, Tanaia, we are spending a great deal of time on the back end. We've already started planning for next session, and we've been doing that for months. What we're doing is saying, what will the implications be? What will this do going forward? And here in Montana, we have a very interesting thing that's going to happen in 2030 where they're going to completely open up our constitution as a state and redo everything.
Wow.
And so currently we have the Armstrong decision from 1999. We have CI 128. We have these things in our state constitution that prevent us from limiting abortion. In 2030, that may completely change. My concern is if hearts and minds have changed to say that criminalization of women is the way to go, there might be quite a bit of support for this, and that's not that far away.
Yeah.
So my concern is let's make sure that we're changing hearts and minds to help them to understand what abortion actually is, how to heal, where to go, what to do, what God actually says about this in a loving and kind way, in a just way, but not in a chaotic way, not in a way that provides division and chaos. We don't want to sow seeds of division. I wholeheartedly want to have unity in the body of Christ and in the pro-life movement. And I really appreciate the work that some of the proponents of this have done in the past in other ways. I just think this particular strategy is not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I would completely agree with that. And do you know if I know we do have a speaking engagement, Abby Johnson, coming up in the Flathead. I don't think she's doing a tour, but do you know if there's any other significant activism that's happening in the background in Montana on this topic to change hearts and minds that direction? Are you aware of anything currently going on?
I know Seth has been calling our legislators
Wow.
and really pushing for this agenda.
Okay.
When I talk to legislators, sometimes they're very forthcoming with that, he's been calling them and pushing, pushing, pushing. I know that when I've talked to other groups, such as Students for Life, they are looking at this as possibly being a long-term solution, but not being an immediate solution. And there was an event that I spoke on the same stage as Seth a couple years ago in Helena. I think you might have been there. Sharon Nason had a fundraiser
Okay. I don't think
for
I was at that one.
okay. It was at this barn. Kleffner Ranch was the name of it.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful facility, beautiful event. And Seth was talking about his 1916 project. It was before he really got on board with this. But they had seen that I was on the same stage with him, and they called me on the carpet and said, we can't work with you if you are working with Seth Gruber right now because of what he's saying.
Wow.
So I think what we're seeing right now, there are things happening in the background where these
Yeah.
folks are trying to push, and the other big groups are being aware of that. That's something to be aware of. I do see there's a big event with Abby and AJ Hurley just over the border in Idaho, and I know that that's just a geographical line in the sand
Yeah.
or line in the trees, as it were.
Yep.
And so I think that activism is something we need to be aware of because Idaho is more susceptible. Their laws are a little different.
Sure.
That those are things that I am aware of.
Okay.
Beyond that, I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful just to be aware, and I think just for our listeners to know, when this subject comes up, if you're, consider if you're anywhere in the pro-life movement, when this comes up, maybe this conversation that we've had can just give them some language of here's, because I think it's a good question. I think if when we, when I was first presented this question, I hadn't had the opportunity to really think it through for myself. Like I explained, I've always just known in my heart of hearts that abortion hurts women too, and that's one of the main reasons I'm in this actually, is abortion hurts women, and I think of the people in my life that I know that have experienced abortion, and then so there's all other kinds of questions like, okay, so if you have the death penalty for post-abortive moms, how does that go back to all of time? Are we going to start sending, all these women that have had past abortions? And so does that mean that people that I know that are close to me, they're going to end up in jail? Like they didn't know what they were doing. And so I just think it's good to be aware of this as it comes about, so we can be discerning with wisdom what we want for our state. Because I think we do absolutely need to be changing the culture in our state. We want it to be more pro-life, not more pro-death. And just I think it's an easy answer if it was, if there was no other factors and it was like, well, sure, just make it illegal, make there be consequences for making this action, because that's how laws work. There's, if you speed, there's a consequence for that action, so you're less likely to speed. And that is a human nature concept that does work. But this specific area is so much more complicated. It was very educational for me to hear you explain what the definition of murder is, because that even separates it out of, this is different even than if, those horrific stories of a mom or a dad just can't handle the new parent thing and something happens and they end up, strangling their baby or smothering them or something just horrific. And that's criminalized. You committed a murder, you should be punished, but you knew what you were doing. And so
Yes.
it's very different than what abortion is. So I think for our listeners out there, just know that as this topic comes up, I don't think that we're necessarily, we're not bashing those who agree with this in our movement. Abby Johnson, Seth Gruber, it
No.
grieves me because they both are so influential and have so much positive just thought processes and ideology to add to this movement. And so it grieves me that potentially we could be going down that track with some of that influence because they have such influence. And so I think we should be praying for them.
Absolutely.
We don't need to, bash them or cancel them. And maybe for a time, like you said, maybe we are just careful what we listen to from those influential people and just pray that they come around. Because it sounds like people are asking the right questions of, well, what about the resource centers? What about, this mom that didn't know? And I think that, all of our hearts are in the right place. We all want abortion to end. And we want it to end tomorrow, as Abby Johnson says. And this, if there was no other factors, in theory, this should do that. But it would essentially just kill our witness to women that need to experience forgiveness and love. And we flock to those as humans, to who accepts us for who we are and who loves us. And if moms feel that from the pro-life movement, which they have, the phrase abortion is murder, I've never liked that phrase, because it's not, it's killing a baby, but women aren't murderers. They're confused, and
Mm-hmm.
we need to be opening up with compassion to them. If we want abortion to become unthinkable, we have to be willing to accept these men, women, and families that have had abortion in their past, or they're considering it in their future. There's a lot of people in Montana right now that are like, I don't really like abortion, but it's okay for someone else, right? So we have to work from that point forward and realize that just sending women, like I said in the beginning, sending them to jail instead of Jesus isn't the answer. Um, I don't think so. Any last thoughts, Robin? Anything you want our listeners to know about this topic, or resources, or any other just last topics that you want to share with us about this?
Sure. I just want to emphasize that abortion pits moms against babies.
Wow.
It has to be one or the other.
Yeah.
In God's economy, it's not. It's both and, not either or. He loves us all. He loves the dads, he loves the moms, he loves the babies. And we, even as just decent humans, even people who don't yet know the Lord, uh, you know, in our hearts, usually there is a place for each human being, not just this one and not that one.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we have to dehumanize one group for the sake of the other, we're already on the wrong side of it, right?
Yeah.
Abortion does that. Abortion dehumanizes the baby for the sake of the mom. This concept of criminalizing mom, it actually dehumanizes mom for the sake of the baby. So anything that pits one against the other, I would be very, very suspect of. I
Wow.
don't think that is the way that we want to go. I don't think we need to dehumanize anyone.
Yeah.
I think that's the wrong way to go. As far as resources going forward, I go around and I speak just about everywhere. I do workshops. You've been to some of my workshops, Tanaia.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are always very interactive, very informational. And if someone would want to have a workshop for their church or their pro-life group or their civic group, I can be reached at connect@montanansforlife.com. And I'd be happy to schedule that. Come out and share a workshop based on these topics and, you know, have some time for question and answer because I feel like this is a big topic and
Yeah.
question and answer is definitely a good way to go with that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. It is. Yes, I've been to some of your workshops and they're always educational and you have these beautiful PowerPoints and PowerPoint notes and that just is just how my brain works. And so it's just, you glean so much from them. So thank you for offering that for our listeners. So yeah, we definitely recommend you reach out to her. Connect@montanansforlife.com, correct?
Yeah.
Yep. And you can email her there. And yeah, just I mean, there's other podcasts out there, other episodes on both sides of the subject. So I'd say let's just be educating ourselves and just be aware that this is coming forth, and just be really keen on our discernment of what is the spirit behind some of these arguments, because I think that we're gaining a lot of momentum across the nation and about pro-life, and we have some excellent government officials that are doing some things. It's back at the states, but there's movement, there's momentum going forwards. There's especially I hear of young men that are being raised up and they are not about abortion. So there's things happening, and so on a deeper level, I think that the pro-abortion side would love nothing more than to just see us all, at each other's necks about these things, and there's infighting. And so if we have the infighting, then how can we actually be productive? And that's something that the pro-abortion side does really well, is even if you agree a little bit with them, that maybe abortion is not right in this scenario, they're going to welcome you in, they're going to accept you, you're going to be their next best friend, and they're going to love you. And so then you're going to believe more what they think. But it wasn't, all or nothing in the beginning. And I think that because of that, they would love nothing more than to see us, we disagree on this one area of this, and so no longer can we associate. They would love to see that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and I just think that is just such a tactic of the enemy, is just to divide and to do that. So I just think we have to be careful as we're moving forward, and treat those that disagree with us, with honor, as we have these subjects across these discussions across the state. I've talked to people locally that I'm still friends with them, but because their stance has always been so intense on, the mother is a murderer, we don't do a lot of events together. I don't typically invite them in on some things that I'm doing. I think that, their hearts are trying to head the right direction, But I think we just have to have discernment as we move forward as a movement in Montana. And so for our listeners, just mostly just be aware that this is happening. If you're going to go to an Abby Johnson event, we like to say at my church, take the meat and spit out the bones. You don't, it
Yep.
doesn't have to be all or nothing. Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
you're in the same type of, yeah, you know
Yeah.
that. And so I think that we can, listen to these people and keep the meat and spit out the bones and make sure that we're following the word of God on these things. Um,
Mhm.
and let's prevent any type of this legislation from coming forth in our state. So if it gets to that point and we hear of something like that, for our listeners, just I would highly recommend that you call your legislators. If Seth Gruber is calling your legislators, maybe you should be calling them as well
Yep.
and telling them that you don't want things like this in our Constitution or as a law or anything. So, any last thoughts, Robin? Last
No, I
thoughts?
think I think we covered it.
We did. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on, and I learned so much. We'll have to have you on again just to share your story of being an abortion survivor. It is incredible. So for our listeners, again, if you want to connect with Robin, it's connect@montanansforlife.com. If you have thoughts or questions, or I'll say it, even arguments about this topic specifically, especially if you have arguments, please reach out to us at abortignorancemt@gmail.com, because we want to be having these conversations with each other. We all bring something to the table. So we want to hear from you. Again, thoughts, questions, comments, even arguments about this, because I could see a lot of pro-lifers across Montana hearing this episode and just getting really fired up because there's that justice side. And so if that's you, let's have a conversation and just talk through it some more. As always, subscribe to our channel so you get notifications of future episodes and downloads. You can listen anywhere on the go. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram. Follow us there, send us a private message. So we just thank you guys for being with us today. Thank you, Robin, for sharing all of that knowledge with us. And we hope to
Thanks
have
for
you
having
on.
me.
Yes, of course. Yeah. And we hope to have you on again soon. So until next time, guys, have a good one.